It was late evening in a small town in Arizona, and Daniel stayed alone in his repair shop after everyone else had gone home. The air smelled of metal, dust, and oil. The tools were lined up neatly, the way he always liked them. He had built this small business with his own hands, starting from an old shed years ago. Now the shop had 6 workers, and most of them had been with him for years. To Daniel, they were not just workers. They were like family. He trusted them more than anyone else. The street outside was quiet, with only the sound of a passing truck breaking the silence. Daniel wiped his hands and checked his cash drawer. It was the end of another long day, and he was proud of how far he had come. He switched off the main lights and stepped out to lock the gate. The night sky was clear, filled with stars, and the wind carried the faint smell of rain. As he turned to leave, he saw something that made him stop. Near the old gas pumps, just a few feet away from the edge of his parking lot, stood a young girl. She looked out of place, too clean, too still, and too quiet for this dusty town. She was wearing a plain gray dress that seemed to shine softly under the streetlight. Her skin was pale, her hair long and silver, and her eyes, they were bright like glass, reflecting the light in a strange way. Daniel thought maybe she was lost, so he walked closer. "Hey there," he called gently. "You okay? It's late to be out here." The girl didn't move at first. Then she turned her head slowly, looking at him with calm, shining eyes. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "Someone's stealing from you," she said. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" But before he could take another step, she backed away into the darkness. One blink, and she was gone. No sound of footsteps, no car driving away, nothing. Just the empty road and the cool desert wind. Daniel stood still, confused. He looked around the parking lot again, checked behind the fuel pump, even walked a few steps into the road. But there was no sign of her. The night felt heavier now, and a small chill ran through his body. He rubbed his arms and gave a small laugh to himself. "Guess I'm tired," he muttered. Too much coffee and not enough sleep. Still, the words kept ringing in his head. "Someone's stealing from you." When he got home, he couldn't shake it off. He lived alone in a small house on the edge of town, not far from his workshop. He made himself some tea and sat on the porch, watching the stars. He thought about the girl, her strange eyes, her voice, the way she disappeared. Maybe she was just some kid playing around. Or maybe she had mistaken him for someone else. But deep down, a quiet uneasiness started to grow. The next morning, Daniel tried to forget the whole thing. He arrived early at the shop, as always, before the others. The smell of oil and gasoline filled the air. He unlocked the office, checked his books, and prepared for the day. His employees began to arrive one by one. Mike, the foreman, who'd been with him for 5 years, Joe, the parts handler, and the younger boys, Sam and Ricky, who handled deliveries and cleaning. Everyone greeted him like usual, cheerful and relaxed. Daniel forced a smile and joined in the morning chatter, but his mind kept going back to that strange warning. Someone's stealing from you. By noon, business was running smoothly. A few local farmers brought in their trucks, and one family stopped by with a broken radiator. Daniel moved between jobs, helping wherever needed, laughing with his crew. Everything looked normal. Yet every now and then he caught small things that didn't fit. Mike seemed more distracted than usual, checking his phone too often. Joe took longer to fetch supplies from the back than he normally did. And when Daniel looked at the inventory sheet, he noticed the numbers didn't add up perfectly. A few boxes of parts seemed missing, but he told himself maybe it was a counting error. Still, the thought kept scratching his mind. He found himself repeating her words silently. Who was she? How did she know him? Why would she say something like that? That evening, after everyone left, Daniel stayed back again. He decided to double-check the accounts. He compared invoices, receipts, and supplier bills. It all looked fine on paper. But the totals were slightly off, not by much, just small amounts here and there. A few missing tools, a few short supplies. It wasn't enough to call the police, but it was enough to make him think. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above him. Maybe he was being paranoid. Maybe it was a simple mistake, but something deep inside told him it wasn't. As he walked out of the office, he looked at the parking lot again. The air was cool and silent, just like the night before. He found himself scanning the shadows, almost hoping to see that silver-haired girl again, to ask her who she was and what she knew. But the lot was empty. Only the stars were watching. He locked the doors and stood for a moment beside his truck. The lights of the town were faint in the distance. The desert stretched endlessly around him, quiet and still. He thought of how hard he had worked for everything, how many nights he had gone without sleep to build the shop, how he trusted his workers like family. If someone really was stealing from him, it would break his heart more than anything. Before driving home, he whispered softly, "If you're out there, little girl, who are you?" The only answer was the low hum of the wind and the distant cry of a nightbird. Daniel got in his truck and drove away slowly, still watching the side mirrors as if expecting something to appear behind him. The glow of the shop's sign faded in the distance, leaving only darkness. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the same voice in his head, calm, soft, and sure. "Someone's stealing from you." He tried to push it away, but the words stayed with him, whispering through the corners of his thoughts. He didn't know it yet, but that single sentence, spoken by a strange girl under the desert stars, was about to change everything in his life. The next morning, Daniel woke up early. The sun had not fully risen yet, and the light through his window was soft and golden. He made coffee and stood by the kitchen window, looking out at the quiet desert road that led to his shop. The night's strange thoughts still hung in his mind. He tried to shake them off, telling himself it was just his imagination. But deep down, he knew something about that silver-haired girl's words felt real. When he reached the shop, the air was already warm. His workers were arriving one by one. Mike, his foreman, was the first to show up as usual. Mike had been with Daniel for years, and he was one of the few people Daniel trusted completely. He was good with machines and knew how to handle the other workers. Still, Daniel noticed something different in him today. His usual smile seemed forced, and he kept glancing at his phone instead of greeting Daniel properly. "Morning," Daniel said. "Morning, boss," Mike replied quickly, then walked straight to the back room. A few minutes later, the others arrived, Joe, the parts handler, and two younger workers, Sam and Ricky. They joked as they came in, throwing light-hearted comments, but Daniel could tell they were a little too relaxed for a busy day. He didn't say anything, though. He just nodded and went to his office to check the supply list. When he opened the books, he frowned. The numbers still didn't make sense. A few small items were missing: bolts, oil cans, and a few expensive tools. It wasn't much, but enough to raise a question. He checked the delivery slips again. Everything seemed signed and complete. But if everything was right on paper, why were the shelves a little emptier every week? Daniel walked out of the office and looked around the workshop floor. Joe was moving boxes from the storage room, but he was in too much of a hurry, almost as if he didn't want Daniel to watch. Sam was cleaning a truck engine, but his eyes kept drifting toward the clock. Ricky was supposed to clean the floor, but he was outside smoking near the side door. Something about the whole place felt off. The work was being done, but not with the usual energy. It was like they were only pretending to be busy. At lunchtime, Daniel sat in his small break room, eating a sandwich and thinking about what the girl had said. He wondered again who she was. She had spoken so calmly, like she already knew what was happening. Her words didn't sound like a guess, and they sounded like a fact. Someone stealing from you. The sound of the words echoed in his memory again. He rubbed his eyes and sighed. Maybe he was reading too much into it. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But then something happened that made his heart skip a beat. When he walked back into the workshop, he noticed the small side door near the back office was slightly open. That door was supposed to stay locked during work hours. It led to the storage area where all the expensive tools and spare parts were kept. He quietly walked closer. From behind the door he could hear faint voices. "Keep it low," one of them said. Daniel stopped. He recognized that voice. It was Joe's. "I told you, he never checks this part," Joe whispered again. Daniel felt a cold rush in his chest. He didn't move or open the door. He just listened. There was another voice, but softer, too quiet to recognize. Then he heard footsteps and the sound of something metallic hitting the floor. Before he could step inside, the voices stopped. The door opened and Joe came out with a box in his hands. When he saw Daniel standing there, he froze for half a second, just a blink, and then quickly smiled. "Oh. I was just moving some stuff for inventory, boss," Joe said, pretending to act normal. "Didn't mean to scare you." Daniel nodded slowly. "Everything okay back there?" "Yeah, all good. Just sorting things," Joe replied. He placed the box down and walked away too fast. Daniel waited until Joe was gone, then walked into the storage room. He looked around carefully. The shelves looked fine, but when he checked the back corner, he noticed something strange. A few empty boxes that should have been full. Some labels were removed and one of the shelves had dust marks where something heavy had been recently taken away. He didn't say anything to anyone, not yet. That night, after everyone left, Daniel decided to stay late again. He sat in his office pretending to work, but his eyes were fixed on the small security monitor. The old system had one camera facing the main floor, but it didn't cover the side door. Still, he thought it might catch something. Hours passed and the shop became quiet. Only the hum of the ceiling fan filled the room. Around midnight, Daniel heard something. A faint sound like a door creaking open. He looked at the monitor, nothing. He stepped out quietly and moved toward the back hallway. From the crack of the office door, he saw shadows moving. Someone was inside the shop. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. He watched silently as two figures moved toward the storage room. They used flashlights, keeping their beams low to the floor. They opened the side door and began carrying out boxes, stacking them near the window. He didn't recognize both faces clearly, but one of them looked like Joe. The second one, Daniel couldn't see properly, but the shape and size looked like Mike. He stepped back, breathing slowly, trying not to make a sound. He didn't want to scare them away yet. He wanted to be sure. When they left, Daniel quietly followed the faint glow of the flashlights from the window. He saw them load the boxes into a small truck parked near the alley behind the shop. Then they drove away into the night. Daniel stood alone in the dark, staring at the empty spot where the truck had been. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear but from disbelief. The people he trusted most, the ones he helped, trained and treated like family, were the ones stealing from him. He walked back inside and sat down at his desk. He didn't move for a long time. He just stared at the floor, remembering every kind gesture, every friendly laugh, every promise they had made to him. The silver-haired girl's words came back again, clear and certain. "Someone's stealing from you." Now he knew she was right. And deep down he realized something else, and the girl hadn't just given him a warning. She had given him a choice. Tomorrow he would decide what to do. The morning sun rose slowly over the small Arizona town, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Daniel sat in his truck outside the shop, holding his coffee cup, but he didn't drink from it. He had barely slept. The image of his workers sneaking out with stolen parts replayed in his mind over and over again. He couldn't believe it. The people he trusted most, the ones he treated like his own family, were the ones betraying him. He kept asking himself why. He had given them good pay, treated them kindly, and even helped some when they were in trouble. He had fixed their cars for free, loaned money when they needed it. Yet they had still chosen to steal from him. When Daniel finally stepped out of his truck, his face showed no anger. It showed only quiet sadness. He walked toward the shop, unlocked the door, and stood in the middle of the workshop floor. The smell of oil and dust filled the air. Everything looked normal again. The shelves were arranged, the tools in place. But Daniel knew now that what looked normal wasn't always honest. One by one, his workers arrived. Joe came in whistling as if nothing had happened. Mike arrived soon after, smiling faintly and greeting Daniel in his usual calm tone. Sam and Ricky followed, joking about something from last night. None of them had any idea that Daniel knew the truth. "Morning, boss," Mike said, putting down his bag. Daniel looked at him for a long moment, then simply replied, "Morning." He spent the rest of the morning pretending everything was fine. He wanted to watch them carefully. He wanted to see how far they would go. Inside, his mind was already made up, but his heart was heavy. Around noon, he quietly checked the security camera again. The footage wasn't very clear, but it was enough to show what he needed to see. Two figures entering after hours carrying boxes out the side door, and one of them, Mike's jacket, his walk, unmistakable. Daniel leaned back in his chair, sighing deeply. The proof was right there. He didn't need to see more. When lunchtime came, he decided to test something. He walked up to Mike, who was cleaning an old tractor engine. "Hey, Mike," Daniel said calmly. "Did you stop by the shop last night? I thought I saw a light on." Mike looked up quickly. No, boss. Must have been a reflection or something. I was home all night," Daniel nodded slowly. "Right. Must have been the light then." Mike forced a smile and went back to work, but Daniel saw the small twitch in his jaw. He was nervous. Daniel walked to the back room where Joe was sorting bolts and washers. He looked at him for a few seconds and said, "You lock up everything properly last night, Joe." Joe froze for half a second before answering. Yeah. Everything's locked, why?" "No reason," Daniel said, smiling faintly. "Just checking," but in his heart Daniel knew enough. The lies confirmed everything. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Daniel stayed behind again. He sat in the silence of his office, looking out at the empty workshop. The air felt different now, heavier, colder. He turned off the lights, leaving only his small desk lamp on. Its soft glow reflected off the framed photo on the wall, a picture of him and his workers taken 2 years ago. Everyone in the photo was smiling, including Mike and Joe. He remembered the day it was taken. They had just finished a big project together, and he had treated them all to dinner. It had been one of the happiest days of his life. Looking at that photo now, it hurt to know that those same smiles had been hiding lies. As Daniel sat quietly, he thought again about the girl, the one with silver eyes and the calm voice. Who was she? How did she know? Maybe she had seen something, maybe she was someone's child, or maybe she wasn't from this world at all. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was that she had warned him, and she had been right. He decided what to do next. Tomorrow he would face them all, not with anger or shouting, but with truth. He would show them what they had done. The next morning, Daniel arrived early again. He went to the back office, turned on the small television that displayed the camera feed, and rewound the footage one last time. He made sure everything was visible. Then as the others arrived, he called them all together. "Morning, everyone," he said, his voice calm but serious. "We need to talk before we start work today." The men looked at each other, confused. They gathered near the main floor. The sound of tools stopped. Daniel stood in front of them and said quietly, "I've been checking the books lately. Something hasn't been right. Supplies missing, numbers not matching. I didn't want to believe it at first, but last night I found out the truth." He picked up the remote from his pocket and pressed play. The small television showed the recording from the night before. 2 figures sneaking in, carrying boxes, and one of them clearly wearing Mike's old denim jacket. For a moment, no one spoke. The room was completely silent. Joe's face turned pale. Sam and Ricky looked shocked. Mike just stared at the screen, frozen. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were quiet, steady, and full of hurt. "You were like family to me. I trusted you all. I believed in you. And this is what I get in return." Mike tried to speak. Daniel lifted a hand gently. "No, don't. I've seen enough." He looked around the room, his eyes tired but firm. "I don't know who else knew or helped, but I can't keep people here who lie to me. You all need to go." No one moved for a few seconds. Then Mike slowly set down his wrench. Joe hung his head low. Sam and Ricky quietly walked out, their faces pale and ashamed. When they were gone, Daniel stood alone in the workshop. The silence was deep. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the air. He felt a mix of pain and relief. Pain because he had lost the people he trusted, and relief because he finally knew the truth. He sat on the stool near the workbench, looking at the empty space where his crew used to stand. The room felt larger now, emptier. He whispered softly to himself, "You were right, whoever you are." That night, as he closed the shop, Daniel looked up at the sky. The stars were bright again, shining over the quiet town. He thought of the silver-haired girl and her calm voice. She had appeared once to warn him, and she had disappeared just as suddenly. He didn't know if he would ever see her again, but he knew one thing for sure. Her warning had saved everything he had built. The wind moved gently across the open road. Daniel locked the gate, got into his truck, and drove away slowly, leaving behind a shop that felt both lonely and clean, free from lies at last. The next few days felt heavy for Daniel. The workshop, once filled with the sound of laughter, talk, and tools, now stood quiet. The air inside felt different, clean but lonely. The walls echoed with silence where there used to be friendly voices. Daniel came early every morning and stayed late at night. He worked alone, fixing cars, sorting tools, and cleaning every corner of the shop. It wasn't just about work anymore. It was his way of clearing his mind, of starting over. Every time he picked up a wrench or a screwdriver, he remembered the hands that used to hold them. Mike's, Joe's, Sam's, Ricky's. All of them had once helped him build this place, and now they were gone. Sometimes, he found things they had left behind. An old cap on the shelf, a half-used oil bottle, or a wrench marked with their initials. Each small item carried a memory. He didn't throw them away. He simply placed them in a box at the back of the office, as if saving a piece of what used to be good. Outside, the town people started noticing the change. A few customers came by and asked, "Where's your crew, Daniel?" "Shop feels quiet these days." Daniel gave the same short answer every time. They moved on. He didn't tell anyone what had really happened. It was painful, but he didn't want to spread it. He believed that some things were better left unspoken. One afternoon, while repairing a truck engine, Daniel noticed someone standing outside the shop. It was the sheriff. The man leaned against his car, watching Daniel work. Daniel wiped his hands and walked out. "Morning, Sheriff," Daniel said. "Morning, Dan," the sheriff replied. "Heard your crew's gone. Everything all right?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, just making some changes. Needed a fresh start." The sheriff looked at him for a long moment and then said softly, "You're a good man, Dan. If there's something you need to talk about, you know where to find me?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I appreciate that." The sheriff nodded and drove away, leaving behind a small cloud of dust. After he left, Daniel stood in the sunlight, staring at the empty parking lot. He thought again about the girl with silver hair. He remembered the way she had looked at him that night, calm, serious, and certain. She had known something before even he did. He still didn't understand who she was, but he was thankful. That evening, when he locked the shop and turned off the lights, the world outside was covered in orange and pink colors from the sunset. The warm air carried the smell of rain. Daniel sat on the front steps holding a cup of coffee. He looked at the horizon and whispered softly, "You were right. They were stealing from me, but why did you help me?" He didn't expect an answer. He didn't see her again, but somehow he felt like she could still hear him. The next day, Daniel made a big decision. He posted a small note outside the shop window. "Now hiring, honest hands wanted." He didn't expect much, but within a week a few people came by asking for work. Most were young and inexperienced, but their eyes were hopeful. Daniel decided to give them a chance. He trained them himself. He showed them how to handle each tool, how to treat customers with respect, and most of all, how to value trust. Every day, he reminded them, "This shop runs on honesty. You break a part, you tell me. You make a mistake, you fix it. No hiding." The new crew worked hard, eager to learn. Slowly, the noise of life returned to the workshop, the sound of tools, laughter, and radio music. But it was different now. The air felt lighter. Daniel smiled more often, but deep inside he carried a quiet lesson. Never trust blindly, but also never stop believing in good people. One evening, while sweeping the floor before closing, Daniel found something under one of the shelves. It was a small folded piece of paper. He opened it slowly. The handwriting was not familiar. It said only one line, "You did the right thing. Keep your heart clean." Daniel froze. He looked around the shop, empty, quiet, but peaceful. The handwriting was neat, almost too perfect, and the paper looked new. There was no sign of anyone who could have left it. He walked outside, scanning the street, but there was no one there. Only the soft wind and the glow of the sunset. He held the note tightly in his hand. His eyes moved to the sky, where a single bright star had appeared even before the night had fully come. For a moment he thought of her again, the girl with silver hair and glowing eyes. Was she real, or just something beyond understanding? He didn't know, but somehow she always seemed to appear when he needed her most. That night, Daniel locked the shop with a calm heart. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel angry or lonely. He felt grateful for the warning, for the second chance, and for the peace that had returned. At home, he cooked a simple dinner and sat on his porch, watching the stars rise one by one. The desert was quiet and the wind carried a soft tune through the cactus fields. He remembered the girl's voice, soft, almost musical, telling him that someone was stealing from him. He realized now that she hadn't only warned him about his workers. She had reminded him of something bigger, that truth, no matter how painful, always brings freedom. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the shop early again. His new team greeted him warmly. He smiled back, feeling a sense of pride. The shop had been rebuilt, not with stronger walls, but with stronger hearts. He took the folded note from his pocket and placed it inside the old photo frame on his desk, the same frame that once held the picture of his old crew. Now it held something different, a message that meant more than any picture ever could. As the day began, Daniel stood by the open door of his shop, looking out at the morning sun. He whispered softly, "Thank you wherever you are." The wind picked up slightly, brushing against his face like a soft touch. It was almost like someone was answering him, not in words, but in peace. Daniel smiled and went back to work. He didn't need to see her again. He already knew she was out there somewhere, watching, protecting, and reminding him to stay true. And from that day on, every time the night sky filled with silver stars, Daniel would pause for a moment, look up, and whisper, "I'm still doing the right thing." Months passed, and Daniel's life began to settle into a calm rhythm. The workshop was alive again, not with the same people, but with new faces, new energy, and new trust. The sound of tools, engines, and laughter filled the air every day. Daniel had rebuilt not just his shop, but also his peace of mind. The new workers respected him deeply. They were honest, hard-working, and grateful for the chance he had given them. Daniel didn't talk much about the past. He focused on the present, on teaching, helping, and making sure no one ever repeated the same mistakes that had once hurt him so deeply. But even with all the good around him, a small mystery still lived quietly in his heart, the silver-haired girl who had warned him that night. He never forgot her words. Sometimes, while working alone late in the evening, he would glance toward the old gas pumps outside, half expecting to see her again, but she never came. One night after closing, Daniel stood outside the shop as the wind blew softly through the desert. The stars shimmered above like pieces of silver dust spread across the dark sky. He leaned against his truck, holding a cup of coffee, and let the cool air wash over him. He thought about how far things had come. The shop had survived, and so had he. The pain of betrayal had turned into quiet wisdom. He had learned that sometimes losing people was not a punishment. It was protection. As he finished his coffee, he heard a faint sound behind him. It was light, like footsteps on gravel. He turned around slowly, and there she was, the same girl standing under the streetlight near the gas pump. Her silver hair glowed softly in the night breeze. Her calm eyes reflected the light of the stars. She looked exactly the same as before, untouched by time. Daniel's heart stopped for a moment. He blinked to make sure she was real. "It's you," he said quietly. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." The girl smiled faintly. "You're doing better now," she said in that same soft musical voice. "Your heart is lighter." Daniel nodded slowly. "You were right about everything. They were stealing from me. Because of you, I stopped it before it was too late." The girl tilted her head slightly. "You stopped it because you listened," she said. "Most people ignore what they feel. You didn't." Daniel took a few steps closer, though still keeping a gentle distance. "I've thought about you many times," he said. "Who are you?" "How did you know?" "You weren't just passing by that night, were you?" The girl didn't answer right away. She looked toward the stars instead, her eyes shining like silver glass. After a moment, she said softly, "Sometimes people need a small push to see what's already in front of them. You were too kind to see the truth. I only reminded you to look." Daniel didn't know what to say. Her words felt simple, but they carried something deep inside them, something that made his heart both warm and calm at once. He smiled faintly. "I owe you a lot. I don't know how to thank you." The girl looked at him gently. "You already did. You listened, you learned, and you changed. That's enough." For a moment, they both stood quietly under the soft light. The wind moved through the empty street, carrying the sound of a faraway train. Daniel wanted to ask more, where she came from, why she had chosen to help him, whether she was human at all. But he didn't. Somehow he felt that the answers didn't matter. Finally, the girl spoke again. "You have a good heart, Daniel. Don't let the world make it hard." He nodded, feeling his throat tighten. "Will I see you again?" She smiled, a small, peaceful smile. "Maybe, but you don't need to." Her eyes seemed to glow brighter for a moment, catching the reflection of the stars above. Then she stepped back slowly, her figure fading into the shadows beyond the gas pumps. One blink and she was gone, just like the first night. Daniel stood there for a long time, watching the place where she had stood. The air felt warmer somehow, filled with quiet comfort. He knew she was gone, but the peace she left behind stayed with him. The next morning, the world felt fresh. The sun rose golden over the desert, and the light touched every corner of the workshop. Daniel came in early as usual. His new crew arrived with cheerful greetings. "Morning, boss," one of them said. "Morning," Daniel replied with a smile. He started the day by checking the books as he always did. Every number matched perfectly. Every tool was in its place. The shelves were full, the engines running smoothly, and the trust between him and his team was strong. During lunch, one of the new boys asked, "Mr. Daniel, why do you always look at the stars at night before leaving?" Daniel smiled kindly. "Because the stars remind me that some people come into your life just to guide you, even if they're not meant to stay." The boy didn't quite understand, but he smiled anyway and went back to work. Later that evening, when the shop closed, Daniel stood outside again. The sky was full of stars, brighter than he had ever seen before. He took a deep breath, feeling calm and grateful. He whispered softly, "Thank you again, whoever you are." A soft breeze moved across his face, gentle and warm, almost like a reply. From that night on, Daniel lived differently. He trusted carefully, but he loved openly. He worked harder, but he smiled more. The memory of that strange girl became a quiet part of his life, a mystery he never solved, but one that always gave him strength. Every night, before he locked the shop, he looked up at the sky. Sometimes he thought he saw a faint shimmer of silver among the stars, a reminder that somewhere out there, someone was still watching, still caring, still guiding. And whenever doubt or fear tried to return, Daniel would simply whisper the words he had learned from her. "Keep your heart clean." The town came to know Daniel as not just a good mechanic, but a wise man, someone who had faced betrayal and turned it into faith. His story quietly spread among people who came to his shop. They said he was a man who once got a warning from a girl who looked like she came from the stars. Daniel never confirmed it, and he never denied it. He just smiled every time someone mentioned it. Deep inside, he knew it was true. Years later, when Daniel looked back on his life, he realized that one simple meeting had changed everything. A few quiet words under a starlit sky had rebuilt not just his business, but his soul. And even though the world moved on, he carried her voice within him forever, soft, calm, and true. "Someone stealing from you." Those words had started everything. They had broken his heart, but they had also rebuilt it stronger, wiser, and cleaner than ever before. And whenever he saw the stars shining bright above his quiet little town, he felt that same calm presence again, reminding him that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places and kindness always finds its way back home.